retirement home now had to go begging for a worker, anyone qualified to go inside. And still parents died. Some didn't have COVID-19 but withered with extreme loneliness. What sad deaths they had. Suddenly, the isolation of elders became a talking point. Geriatricians who spent their careers warning about the impact of loneliness on older people now had a new audience. And while I'm reluctant to claim that emotional fulfillment will deflect a virulent virus, most homes I visited for this book, all focused on individualized care, did well in controlling COVID-19. There were many reasons, perhaps even a bit of luck, but all shared a philosophy that placed the resident at the top of their organizational pyramid. Early in the pandemic, the home I visited just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, wrapped itself in a bubble, asking staff to, quote, shelter in place by living inside the home, blocking infections from the outside world. 60 workers volunteered. We did it because we just felt it was the right thing to do, which is usually your best decision, said Andy Isaacson of Park Springs. I think our relationship-based model of care was the foundation. That's why we got the volunteers. In Saskatoon's Sherbrooke Community Centre, the daily buzz in the arts studio or wine tasting club was silenced as people isolated in their neighborhoods, but activities continued inside with safe distancing. As the weeks turned to months, it became clear that there is a deep desire for new ideas, and I hope the stories told in this book offer inspiration. Nothing will change unless citizens and advocates push for true innovation, creating a different approach to the way we live in our older years, focusing on friendship, purpose, and the potential to flourish at any age. Introduction. In his day, my dad was an athlete, making local headlines for baseball, sprinting, and soccer in his hometown of Windsor, just across the American border. As a young man, he'd slip over to Detroit to watch the Tigers play and dreamed, probably a few years too long, of making it to the big leagues, preferably in Boston where Ted Williams was creating magic. I'm sure my dad thought his youth would never end, and later, in middle age, that his strength would always last. The truth was, it did last, powering him through life until, at age 88, tiny, and still immaculately dressed, he was starting to fall. He'd trip at home, grab a bookcase for support, and heavy volumes of Second World War history would crash beside him. Sometimes, a rebel with a cane, he'd march out of the house to mail letters, and when my mom peered out the window, she'd see him rolling on the sidewalk, trying to get up, while a neighbor ran to help. "There your father was, on the ground again," she'd say over the phone. And yet, in small-town Ontario, my parents kept strolling, with canes, or less jaunty, sturdy metal walkers. When they didn't walk, local volunteers sometimes offered rides for haircuts, visits to the downtown bookstore, exercise classes, or my mom's one weekly excursion without her husband of 61 years, the book club, where discussions ranged from American politics to the scandals of Me Too. Like the millions of elderly parents of boomers and Gen X children, they were still here, still hanging on. Even if I shuddered at the thought of my father's walk to the grocery store, he would not be deterred. It was a risk, but it was his choice, his risk, and after losing his driver's license 2 years ago due to a series of mini-strokes, it allowed him to stay active in his world. In summer 2018, a few weeks before my mom's 90th birthday, I was about to publish a Toronto Star newspaper investigation into an Ontario nursing home that was transforming itself from a traditional institution into a place of warmth, friendship, and, dare I say, love. My colleague, videographer Randy Risling, and I spent a year visiting the Redstone Dementia household in a nursing home operated by the Region of Peel, just west of Toronto. This was the first nursing home in Ontario to add the UK-based butterfly model, trying to extricate itself from the old task-focused culture by changing the way staff envision care, from leadership all the way to the housekeeper.